Qualified immunity finally is getting a second glance, and hopefully something will be done about it. There's no reason that having a badge will grant you extra rights, which unfortunately sometimes it does seem. More often than not, it is not a race thing. It is not a black cop, black suspect, white suspect type thing. It is a cop suspect thing. That's it. And qualified immunity is a big part. If you give people immunity against something, they're going to abuse it because, well, they have immunity for it. It's like power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. Imagine being told that you can do certain things that are normally against law, but in your case, you are immune to it. So yes, qualified immunity should be looked at and should be revamped. So let's read this. And ABC News. With police misconduct in the spotlight, the U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday will consider whether to revisit its 50-year-old doctrine of qualified immunity for law enforcement officers, which it absolutely should revisit it. There's no reason that if an officer violates your rights that they should be allowed to get away with it. They don't all of a sudden become some sort of super citizens who have more rights than you do when they put on a badge. That's just not the way it works. In fact, if anything, cops should be held to a higher standard, both morally and professionally. But this qualified immunity has shielded cops from civil lawsuits, even in cases where a citizen's rights have been violated, which is absolutely absurd. If a cop violates your rights, yes, they should face consequences. Absolutely. And it's been an ongoing problem for a very long time. This is the cornerstone of our culture of near zero accountability for law enforcement. Jay Schweikert, a criminal justice policy analyst at the Cato Institute, said of the doctrine created by the court in the late 1960s. Yeah, and zero accountability is absolutely a problem. Anybody or any place or anything that has zero accountability is an issue. Everything should be held accountable for what it is. We should be able to hold things up by their merits, look at them, and then decide for ourselves. YouTube. While the Civil Rights Act of 1871 gives Americans the unambiguous ability to sue public officials over civil rights violations, the Supreme Court has subsequently limited liability to only those rights that have become clearly established by law. What about the right of life? Right of liberty? Critics say the standard is near impossible to meet. Yeah, it is. In order for a plaintiff to defeat qualified immunity, they have to find a prior case that has held unconstitutional an incident with virtually identical facts to the one the plaintiff is bringing, said UCLA law professor Jonah Schwartz. And over the last 15 years, the court has made it a more and more difficult standard for plaintiffs to overcome to go to trial. And they do that on purpose. I understand the argument that, well, if cops are scared to do their job, then they can't do their job. But if cops are doing their job right, then they have nothing to be scared of. If you're not violating anybody's rights, then what's the problem? What is the problem? There is none. So what gives? Why? Why is it so difficult? The issue has been percolating in lower courts for years and drawn increasing scrutiny from across the political spectrum. It returns to the Supreme Court now by coincidence as the country grapples with fallout from the death of George Floyd while he was in Minneapolis police custody on Memorial Day. It sucks that it takes a tragedy to open people's eyes to make them see some things that are not correct, but the wheels of justice are slow, and all wheels of justice are slow. There is not one method or motive of justice that moves fast. Not one. They're all the same. During the private weekly conference, the justices are expected to review petitions in 8 different cases involving qualified immunity, which the court established in an attempt to curb gratuitous litigation. This still needs to be looked at. I mean, qualified immunity. Look at it this way. If you were able to go out on the street and do things that normally you wouldn't be able to do, and you had qualified immunity and you were able to do all these things without fear of repercussions, you would probably do all those things because, well, there's no repercussions. Welcome to the human nature. Give humans a little bit of power and they will abuse it. It's just human nature. That's why we have checks and balances. In one case, a Tennessee man suspected of burglary was mauled by a police dog that was released by officers after he was sitting on the ground with his hands raised in surrender. Yeah, I hate that. Cops, if someone's surrendered, if someone is no longer a threat, back the fuck off and just arrest them and be a fucking human being. Another involves a Georgia mother whose 10-year-old son was inadvertently shot in the leg by a deputy pursuing a suspect into the family's yard. Yeah. An Idaho woman who gave police permission and the keys to search her home for a fugitive wants to sue the officers who instead spent hours bombarding it from the outside with tear gas grenades that destroyed her property. The fugitive was not inside. Ain't that just grand? And they can walk away and say, yeah, sorry, tough cookies, that's it, sorry. Yeah. And I know the other argument. Well, if you take that power from the cops, then you're going to take power from them to apprehend and get suspects. No, you're not. You're just going to make them think smarter is all. You're going to make them think smarter. We're going to make smarter cops because they're going to have to think within the bounds of the law. No, without the law. In each case, federal courts dismissed lawsuits against the officers in light of the qualified immunity doctrine. Yeah. Cops knock on your door. They say there might be a fugitive. You give them the keys. You say, go ahead and look. And rather than going in and looking for the fugitive, they bombard the house with tear gas for hours. What the fuck sense does that make? It doesn't. It must be the case that this is weighing heavily on the justices' minds, said Schwickert. They are smart enough to recognize the direct connection between the doctrine of qualified immunity and the outrage over the lack of accountability for law enforcement, motivating so many people to the demonstrations that we are seeing. Yeah. And this should be done. Anyways, I have got to get off to work now. I got to go make sure that your food gets where it's going, seeing as how we're in some sort of weird food shortage. Even though we've got food surpluses, but the food surpluses are tagged for someone else, so they don't. It's a whole crazy story. But I love you guys. And yeah, power corrupts. Qualified immunity is a form of power. Who'da thunk it? Oh, wait. Literally freaking just about every freaking person on the planet Earth. The wheels of justice are slow, people, but they are justice. It really is. And there is no perfect form of justice. Anybody out there that says our form of justice is the worst is a liar. There is no perfect form of justice. But it's what we got. And we have to work within the bounds of that law, of that justice, of those rules in order to change them. You cannot go outside the law because then you have lost all credibility. I love you guys. I'll see you on the next one. And yeah, let's get rid of qualified immunity. Or at least curb it a little bit. It's like power. We can't let them have too much. See you guys on the next one.